Welcome, everyone. I'm Cindy Joyce. I am the founder of Pillar Search and HR Consulting in Boston. I focus on nonprofits and helping them find leaders, as well as doing talent management and different HR projects for them. And I'm a founding ally member of the Chamber and excited to be here. So we're doing a workshop today on resumes and cover letters. So when you're thinking of resumes and cover letters, sometimes it can feel a little bureaucratic and a little random, but why are they important? Think of it as a professional selfie. Your resume is a written picture of your professional life. It tells the story of your job and career journey to date, and also tells the story of where you want to take your career. When they're done well, they help you put your best foot forward for employers. It demonstrates why you're the ideal candidate for the role, either through your experience, or maybe it's delving a little deeper into certain areas in the cover letter to highlight your experience. And it helps you stand out from others in the candidate pool. The two work together. Think of it as a book. Your cover letter is the inside jacket of the book that kind of gives the highlights and overviews. And the resume is the heart of the story. So some resume tips and tricks, and we're going to start with a pop quiz. And someone just call out an answer. The word resume is French for painful, fiction, or summary. Who wants to take a guess? You can also put it in the chat. Oh, I think I see a chat. Summary. Yes, Chris, thank you. And who is credited with writing the first resume? Claude Monet, Leonardo da Vinci, or George Washington? Anyone want to take a guess on that? Da Vinci. Yes, Chris. Chris for the win. Da Vinci was known as a Renaissance individual and is the reason that we have resumes today. Apparently, he felt the need to organize how he shared his many, many accomplishments, and that's how we ended up with this. So in terms of format, your resume should include, and preferably in this order, but everyone has reasons for doing things differently, but in general, your name and contact information, and put that at the top. I've seen a lot lately, and it could just be the roles that I'm searching for. I'm doing a program manager role for Fab Foundation. There are so many people that have it at the bottom, and when I say the bottom, it could be 2 pages in. They've also put it on the side a lot. If I am looking at 60 candidates and I'm calling 5 or 10 for an interview, you want to make sure that you make it as easy as possible for the me on the end of this to find your contact info. And that should include phone, email, as well as your LinkedIn. If you open your LinkedIn profile, you have a unique link on your LinkedIn. That way people can look at your LinkedIn and not have to start searching around for it. The other important thing to do, put it at the top, ideally center, and make sure it's bold. You want your name to stand out. And I also generally suggest doing it, if you can do it and make things fit, in a slightly larger font. It just sort of, think of it as a marquee. You are the star of the show, make your name a little bit bigger. Also include an objective or summary explaining what makes you qualified and unique. Yes, this takes a little more time. Employers notice. I graduated in '92, back in the Stone Age, when we had to not only print our resume on resume paper, but would have to go research companies at the library. We don't have to do that anymore. So take the extra time that is now available and do something, a slightly customized version, whether it's customized to the role, the organization, or the industry. So an example of an objective or summary, and it doesn't have to be super fancy. 5 years human resources experience in the nonprofit sector, excellent public speaking and workshop facilitation skills, skilled at recruiting, training, and handling sensitive employee relations issues. That way, employers see it, and think of it's also sort of like an appetizer. It makes them want a little bit more. And if the job requires things like public speaking, recruiting, and training, they know off the bat that you have that. Then go into your past professional experience. And here, there's also a move to just list, I had this job from these dates. Go into more detail. So list the title, the organization, the dates of employment, and then bullet out what your duties and your successes were. I also like to include a line explaining what the organization does, as it saves the recruiter, hiring manager, or interviewer from having to look it up. And sometimes they won't. So if they have an understanding of who the organization is, it may help things just click a little bit more for them. And your ultimate goal is to have a chance to talk to them. So anything you can do to make things click is going to be better. Also, if you are in the first 10 years or so of your professional experience, if you have internships, I do recommend including those if they are relevant to the role, and go in chronological order, starting with the most recent role. Once you have professional experience, I also love including volunteer experience. It's similar to professional experience, but should be in its own section. And part of it is you probably have developed skills volunteering that are either additive to your professional experience or complementary. As an example, when I started volunteering seriously, I was working in HR, but I was doing PR, and it actually helped me get some interviews because people liked that I had a little bit of both. Then include your education, and similar to jobs, chronological, starting with most recent and working backwards. I also tend to include certificates there. So the way I would do a certificate, say you have a bachelor's or a graduate degree, start with the most recent, go through your degrees, then start putting certificates. A lot of people add a skill summary. Many put it at the top. I find it distracting. I know a lot of people do. If you have it at the bottom, things like different skills, language, technology, having those at the bottom still gives the employer a chance to look at them, but it doesn't clutter the top. And then if space permits and you're comfortable, something with hobbies and interests. But I also urge you not to sacrifice space on your resume. Like, don't add a third page to have skills and hobbies. And don't stretch the truth on hobbies. I've had candidates say that they do something when I ask a question on it. I've had a few people say, okay, I just put it down to put something down. You want to make sure that it's something that you can actually speak to. Any questions so far? No? Okay. And I saw a comment in the chat that it looks like chat is disabled. I don't know if that was intentional. It could be helpful if people have questions, but I don't know how to enable it. So if anyone just wants to speak up, feel free. Other things to include. In terms of the length, it sort of depends on your industry. I have seen pages and pages and pages. I think my record was somewhere between 27 and 36 pages. Way too long. If, however, you're in academia, that might be appropriate. IT, I tend to see longer resumes. They should not go beyond a few pages, though. Don't use jargon, acronyms, or abbreviations. Spell it out. You could have an intern or a super junior recruiter looking at resumes. You want to make sure that people don't have to take an extra step to look things up, because that's where your resume could get lost. And people appreciate that you have included that. Also, hopefully we can share the slides, but after. Use action verbs. There's a list from the site The Muse, 185 action verbs that will impress employers. It is incredible. It really helps people reframe their resume, use the words that will get people excited, and you don't have to, go into Word, into synonyms, and it kind of explains how to use the words. So I highly recommend it. Another thing that helps with spacing is to pare down where you can by eliminating things like pronouns and words like a, an, and the. Instead of saying, I created a new client onboarding system and it was successful, you can shorten it so much, created successful new onboarding system. And given that you're doing this in bullets, it doesn't look funky to have fewer words. You want to make sure that it's crisp, succinct, and to the point. Also, highlight your successes in a quantifiable manner using numbers and percentages whenever possible. So an example would be successful sales manager responsible for bringing in $1 million in new business in the last 6 months, or created a system that reduced errors by 35%. It just gives more backing to your experience. And people like to think in terms of numbers and being able to see what those look like. Also include any honors and awards, like if you were employee of the month or the year or anything like that. And as I mentioned earlier, if you volunteer and or sit on a board, add that section if space permits. These are leadership roles. It shows that you go above and beyond. And especially if you're applying to a nonprofit, you should include those. And chat is now enabled. And I'm actually just looking at the questions as we're going. Would it be appropriate to put LinkedIn also on your resume? Yeah, as I had mentioned earlier, that should go at the top with your contact info. And do you recommend including pronouns on your resume? I actually shorten them out just from a safe space saving. One thing that I see a lot of people do is in the cover letter, in their signature line, they include their pronouns. And I love that because I want to know that when I call someone or if I'm presenting them to the candidate, that I am using their appropriate pronouns. So I think there's a lot of value in doing that. And it just eliminates any confusion. All right, another pop quiz. Feel free to do this in the chat or to speak up with it. When is the ideal time to update your resume? Do you think it's at the end of each month, when you start a new job, or wait until you're looking for a new job? What are your thoughts here? Hannah, start a new job. Absolutely. And why is that? A, then it's updated. You don't have to worry about it. But B, you're so much more aware of the job description at that point. You probably have a copy of it handy. A year goes by, 3 years go by. You may never see your job description again. Update it while it's fresh. And you can always add to it. You can always put in numbers and things as you go on. But even just getting the basics down on paper, because let's say you have a job and 2.5 years from now, your absolute dream job becomes available. You then just have to do a quick update, send your resume in, and you're good to go. You're not starting from scratch. All right, we've talked about what to include. Now here is the recruiter with decades of doing this, what not to include. References upon request. I think of it this way. It's just taking up space. There's really no need. Employers will ask you when they reach that point in the interview process. This one killed me when I turned 30, but graduation dates once you've turned 30. Unless it's a master's degree that you've received or some kind of advanced degree or certificate that you've received recently, you don't want anything that indicates your age. Even if people can do the math based on the years of experience, just avoid it. Saying that you're proficient at using the internet, at social media, I would avoid, because I think it's an assumption that everyone can do it. The one caveat to that is if the role you're going for um, requires it or has that as one of its main responsibilities. But even then, I would use the more technical terms for it, because I think at this point it's just a given. Another thing that goes kind of to age, but if you are less than or more than 5 or 6 years out of school, whether that's when you finished high school, an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, etc., after 5 or 6 years, drop your GPA if you have it included. Um, if you've graduated high school, with the exception of your first post-college job or maybe second post-college job, remove where you went to high school. The other big thing to avoid, anything having to do with a protected class, whether that is age, race, gender, sexual orientation, political affiliation, religious beliefs, marital status, number of children, nationality, etc. If it's something related to the job, you can include it in the cover letter, but never your resume. So, as an example, you vote Democrat and you're applying to work at the Democratic National Convention, probably worth mentioning in the cover letter. I just did a search for the Federation for Children with Special Needs. I had a number of people for the Director of Finance that explained why this interested them. And typically it was they had a child, a stepchild, a niece or a nephew, or a close family friend with special needs. That was appropriate to include. Also, don't include a photo of yourself. I'm sure you're absolutely stunning. However, it's not typically done in the US. And part of that is you don't want for someone to have some crazy reason to not look at your resume further. And it could just be, I don't know, I'm wearing a blue shirt right now. They hate the color blue. And then all of a sudden they have this unconscious bias against you. Remove the photo. And don't include current or past salary information. I'm assuming everyone here lives in Massachusetts. We are no longer allowed to ask candidates what their current or past salary is. You should not open that can of worms, so don't include it. And they shouldn't be asking what you want for salary in a job posting. That used to be a thing, include a cover letter, including your salary requirements and salary history, but it's not anymore. Some resume tips. Use spell check. I know it sounds crazy. However, there are so many words that spell check does not pick up. Maybe it's tense, maybe it's plural versus singular. So use spell check and then go through manually to make sure that you haven't missed. One person once told me to read it backwards, which takes a really long time, but it is amazing how many things you pick up on. And ask 2 friends to review your resume. Use one who's in the industry or your area of expertise and one who's not. Having a fresh perspective can be incredibly, incredibly powerful. Unless you're in a creative field, resumes are still kind of boring. Don't get fancy with colors unless you're in creative. Black font, white background is best. It's classic. It doesn't create issues for those with vision problems. And no font below 11 points. Our eyes get really tired reading resumes. The other thing is try to use these fonts. They're easier for those with dyslexia and other reading challenges. And again, you want to remove any obstacles that may happen in terms of people moving forward with your resume. And I'm looking in the question and answer. What's the difference between noting graduation year versus the date of your earliest job? Some people don't include their entire professional history. I graduated in 92. My first job, which was 3.5 years, isn't in HR. I haven't included it on my resume in probably 2 decades. So someone might look at my resume and not really realize when I graduated. And then when does education move below work experience? Presuming younger candidates will put college up top because at that point it's the biggest experience. Completely agree. And part of it is just my perspective. I don't typically hire people that are just coming out of college, but I agree if college is the big thing on your resume, put that first. And then eventually move it down after first, second job. Great questions. Other tips, the margins should be no smaller than 1 inch. Otherwise, it's too much print and too little blank space, which makes it look crowded and messy. Use things like bold and italics to emphasize, and use bold for the title of each section so that it's just more organized looking and easier for the reader to mentally organize the information in their head as they read it. Also, be consistent with things like spacing, grammar, and punctuation. Your current job should be in present tense. Anything that's in the past should be in past tense. And if you have, I said a questionable email address, but it could just be like something funny. Recruiters and hiring managers don't need to know that you are a Red Sox fan at gmail.com or cute Boston gal at outlook.com. Keep it professional, set up a separate email if you have to. And you can always then forward that to your regular email so that it's just easier to keep track of. But again, anything that's going to prevent people from saying, this is my favorite candidate, get rid of it. The other thing, if you're sending your resume out, make sure that your phone's outgoing message is professional. Having music or a 3-year-old's voice instructing someone to leave a message is adorable for your friends and family. Employers don't find it as comical. You want to set an incredibly professional tone, and you can always change it back later. And this is just my personal opinion. I know some people don't agree with me. I don't like people using work email for sending resumes and cover letters. What it's telling me is you are taking time away from your current employer in order to do this. Wait and do it from your home email. Let's see if there are any additional questions in here. Nope. Okay. Cover letters. Does anyone have any questions before we move in there? Oh. Someone said they usually use Google Voice for calling. Is that okay to use for applications, or does that look bad? No, I think Google Voice is fine. I think it's when people start getting like too creative that it becomes an issue. And Google Voice does have an automated voicemail. I don't actually know Google Voice, so does phone outgoing message mean voicemail message? Yes. Sorry, I should have clarified that. So it's your voicemail. Most people, I wouldn't say most people, a lot of people don't have home phones. If you have a home phone, switch it to your cell just so that no one else is answering and also causing issues. Okay. And cover letters. Think of the cover letter as a business letter, and like any business letter, it should include your contact information, the date, which is the day that you send it, not the day that you write it. So I received something this morning from a candidate who last Tuesday told me she would be sending me her resume, and everything's dated last Tuesday. It just looks a little sloppy. Just make sure you're consistent. Include the recipient's contact information. The other reason is You may think you know who the hiring manager is, and it turns out to be someone totally different. You want it to be obvious who you think you're sending it to. Include an opening salutation. You'd be amazed at how many people don't write, "Dear Miss Joyce," "Dear Cindy," "Dear hiring manager," where they literally just start writing. It's still an old school letter. Have a body to it. It's not just here. A cover letter should do some explaining. Here's the role, why I'm interested in it, all of that. It's not just resume is attached. That's not a cover letter. That's an email. Include a closing salutation and your signature, and that can be an electronic signature. The body itself should be an introductory paragraph. So it's your chance to introduce yourself to the reader. If you were referred, get permission from the person and say, "Cindy Joyce of Pillar Search referred me to this role." And then give a very brief summary of your qualifications and why the role is of interest to you. Then the middle paragraph, highlight 2 or 3 examples of how your experience lines up with their hiring needs. This is when the job description comes in handy. And keep in mind, job descriptions generally are, with some exceptions, they kind of flow in order of the importance of that job duty. So they'll list the most important things first and then go down. So you want to make sure that you line up with that, because in the hiring manager or recruiter's head, they're thinking in terms of how do they align with the most important parts of the job. If it's all the stuff at the bottom, we're probably not going to be running to make a phone call to get you in for an interview, because you're not aligned with the most important parts. So you want your things to line up with the top bullets. And then also talk a little bit about what about the organization resonates with you. Is it their mission, their products and service? Is it something else? You want to sort of show that you have a connection to them in some way beyond just, I need a job, even though that might be why you're doing it. But go beyond that. And then have a closing paragraph and close the letter with optimism and enthusiasm. "I hope to hear from you" is polite and lovely, but it sounds passive and neutral. Something a little bit more leaving the ball in their court and ending on a high note is saying manager name. "Thank you for your time and consideration. I'm very interested in this opportunity, and I look forward to hearing from you about next steps." It's positive and it demonstrates interest. And you want people to be left after the cover letter and the resume feeling like you're truly interested, you understand the job, you understand how your skills align, and you really are interested. Also in the cover letter, this sounds crazy, include the title of the job you're interested in. We're generally hiring for multiple roles, and I say we as hiring managers and recruiters. Saying off the bat, "I am interested in the executive director, the program manager, the sales manager." We know that we're reading the right resume and cover letter. It also helps if you say how you learned of the job. Maybe it's a job posting. Maybe it's you were at a networking event and someone mentioned that the organization is hiring. Include that. It makes a special connection. And explain your why. So as Simon Sinek writes in his book, Start With Why, very few people or companies can clearly articulate why they do what they do. By why, he means your purpose, cause, or belief. Why does your company exist? Why do you get out of the bed every morning? State your why in the body of your cover letter, ideally in that second time to shine paragraph, because if people understand your why, they'll feel like they understand you a little bit better. And similar to your resume, when you're making those connections to the job duties, use some action verbs and quantify your accomplishments whenever possible with numbers and percentages. And if at all possible, have a name. Research who the hiring manager or the recruiter is. It just looks so much warmer and better than to whom it may concern, hiring manager, or the dreaded and not incredibly inclusive sir or madam, or just in my case, sir. I get that a lot, and I'm sort of like, well, you haven't researched at all because I am a female-owned company and a company of one. So there, other than my darling dog, there's no sir here at Pillar. So you just want to avoid those. The more it looks like you've researched, the better you'll look. And then some cover letter tips. And you don't have to repeat this out loud, but in your head. Cover letters should never be longer than 1 page, ever. You are not writing War and Peace. You are not writing a dissertation for your PhD. It is a cover letter, and by definition, a cover is 1 page. Also, don't regurgitate your resume. They're going to be reading it right after. You want this to extract the great things from your resume, but be a slightly different story. Mirror the organization's tone. Look at their website, especially if they have a careers page or vision and values. Does it read formal? Is it fun and lighthearted? The more your cover letter reflects that, the more it seems that you are already part of their culture. And match the font color, style, and size to your resume, and keep that same consistency with spaces, grammar, and punctuation. Otherwise, it looks like someone else wrote your resume. And don't use emojis. I know that should go without saying, yet I received a cover letter last week for a very senior role with a smiley face. And it just felt like, not very leadershipy. Avoid name dropping. I know I said mention who referred you, and that's absolutely appropriate. The only other name on the cover letter should be theirs and yours. And avoid saying, I know X, this person, and this person, or that I met the CEO at an industry event years ago. You can talk about that in the interview. You want the focus to be on you and them. And put yourself in the reader's shoes. Knowing that the reader is likely a recruiting or hiring manager, what will they want to know about you? And objectively, what do you think will make you stand out as the ideal candidate? So know your audience and write it to them. And I'm looking at the questions. Is it important to have an email signature? If so, what's important to include in your signature? Honestly, if you have it in a Word doc and you can do some kind of a signature, that's great. If it's just in an email, think of your work email signature line. You know, I would just put Cindy Joyce. If I'm applying for a job, Cindy Joyce, and probably my phone number and email. It's also just consistent with this being a professional document. And a brief example of the why portion. Well, I use the Simon quote because it's the why and what makes you get out of bed in the morning. What is it that excites you about this? That's what I would include. And do I recommend using a certain font? Yes, I covered that earlier. Let me go back and I will show you those. So the last bullet here, Helvetica, Courier, Arial, and Verdana are known to help people that have reading issues. So I would use those. And that's actually it for this, but do you have any other questions? And thank you for listening. I hope it helps you to stand out and get that great job. Any advice for asking directly for an interview, and is that ever appropriate? I get asked all the time. It can be tough. You don't want to come across as too pushy. Ultimately, it's their decision to interview you. I think what I would do is a closing statement like, I would love the opportunity to have an interview. I'd be very interested in an interview. Sometimes people can get incredibly pushy about it, though. So I think I would more set the stage for the interview to happen. I would welcome it. If you'd like to schedule an interview, I can make myself available, things like that. What do you wear to a job fair? Is a full suit best or something more business casual? I would dress professionally, probably not full suit, maybe a jacket without a tie. I would think of it as just a step below a full interview. So you want to put your best foot forward, but the other thing is there are always companies that aren't big on suits. And when you're interviewing, if it's dress pants is always good. Good question, Nancy. Always appropriate. I wouldn't wear jeans. And for the interview, if you know someone at the organization, ask them how to dress. If it's a recruiter, especially someone like me that's an external recruiter, ask them. For the most part, unless you know otherwise, dress in traditional interview attire, full suit. I have a client where the staff, I'm not kidding, basically show up in sweatpants and almost pajamas. And if a candidate comes in and is not in a full suit, even though they will never again wear a suit while working for them, they will not consider them because it's an interview and they expect people to act appropriately in an interview. So always err on the side of being a little bit more dressed. So, and yes, it will be recorded. It will be on the YouTube channel. And someone asked who I'm with. I have a company here in Boston, Pillar Search, and I work with nonprofits. So, any other comments or questions as you're getting ready for tomorrow's job fair, especially? Oh, I see a question in the Q&A. Ooh, great list of employers coming tomorrow. Gaps in your job history, is it better to explain or not call attention to it? I've seen it handled both ways. Don't try to hide it. If you had a job or you were volunteering, you can fill it in with that. I've seen people who will say that they were, I had one person very cute say that they were CEO of their toddler, and it was that they stayed at home for 5 years. I thought it was a cute way to explain it. Otherwise, if you took 2 years off to travel, I think it's totally fine to put that. Not everyone's career trajectory is a straight line. Sometimes we take paths, sometimes we travel, sometimes we go back to school, sometimes we take time to care for our sick parents or a family member. It is totally fine to not have a resume that has a gap, or to have a resume with a gap. Be ready to talk about it. If you can think of a creative way to explain it in your resume, great. Otherwise, know that it will likely come up as an interview question, and just be ready to talk about it. Hannah has a question. How do you talk about the gap as part of, sorry, it just bounced. As part of coming out and transitioning while caregiving for a spouse? I would just say I was in a period of transition. I was needed at home, and leave it at that. Don't get into too much detail. think of it this way. This person could become your best friend at work. They'll know your entire life history. Saying that you had someone who needed your care, you don't have to say it's yourself. You don't have to say it's your spouse, your parents, whoever. I was taking care of someone in the family. And I think more and more people either have been in that position or know someone who have. So it's an incredibly easy thing to explain, because I think people years ago didn't really understand that. I think we all at this point know someone or have done it ourselves. So very understandable answer. Oh, good. Hannah listed as caregiver. Perfect. And someone is graduating with a master's in December, put that at the top of the resume. Yes, in that case, shift your education to the top and have that be the top thing there. All right, great. Great questions, everyone. Thanks everyone for attending, and good luck at the job fair tomorrow. You'll do great. Well, thank you all. Much appreciated. Have a great day. Bye-bye.